Ink Ribbon.
Today we are focusing on Capcom's poster boy for the Resident Evil franchise. Here are 50 facts about Leon S. Kennedy. Leon graduated from the police academy at the age of 21. Leon wasn't just assigned to the RPD, he actually requested to be assigned there due to all the recent headlines about the murders. When Leon was driving into Raccoon City, he was actually hungover for his first day of work. He had just broken up with his girlfriend and had gotten drunk in a motel room on his way to Raccoon. Although it's unclear how, Kevin Ryman and Leon know each other. Even though his hair color has changed throughout the series, his official natural hair color is brown. Leon was a planned character in the game Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, but was dropped. Leon graduated from the police academy at the top of his class, scoring extremely high on his written tests. Leon's first appearance was in Resident Evil 1.5, which was never released. Even though Leon's disc is labeled Disc 1, the canon playthrough of the original Resident Evil 2 is Claire A, Leon B. The story behind why Leon has a different uniform from all the other RPD officers is that he's wearing his winter uniform, while the cops in Raccoon City are wearing their summer uniforms. On top of this, there was also the added body armor due to the recent rise in crime, which is why Kevin also wears this armor in Outbreak. Leon is 5 foot 8 inches tall, or 178 centimeters. Leon's blood type is A. The first actor to ever play Leon was Brad Renfro from the live-action commercial directed by George A. Romero. While various women have pursued Leon, the only woman he's ever shown any interest in is Ada Wong. Leon, Claire, and a zombie cop had cameos as unlockable characters in the game Trickin' Snowboarder for the PS1. After the end of Resident Evil 2, Claire left to find Chris, and Sherry stayed with Leon before being taken by a man claiming to be a government agent, who might have possibly been Wesker. Leon is friends with Detective Ark Thompson and is the one who sent him to Sheena Island to investigate Umbrella's facilities. In Resident Evil Gaiden, which is not canon, Leon leaves with Barry and the others in the end, but is revealed to be a BOW in disguise. The cover art of Resident Evil Gaiden is actually just a character concept of Leon from 1.5. In Resident Evil 2, when Leon crashes at the beginning, depending on the scenario you're playing, he will either crash head-on or spin around and crash backwards. This is to change which side of the car the characters get out of. In the original story for Resident Evil 2, Leon was already part of the RPD and was hiding in the station with a small group of surviving officers. His signature handgun in real life is a Heckler & Koch VP-70. In Outbreak File 1, Kevin can get an SP item called Football Tickets, and in its description he says he'd like to take Leon. And in Outbreak File 2, you can find an item in the RPD called New Recruit List with Leon's name at the top. Leon was in 2 games for the iPhone, a port of Resident Evil 4 and an adaptation of the Degeneration movie. In the Iceborne expansion for Monster Hunter World, Leon was added as a playable character skin alongside Claire. In Darkside Chronicles, we get to see the origins of how Krauser and Leon met, showing that Krauser was originally a good guy. In Operation Raccoon City, the player is given the option to execute Leon while Claire begs you not to. In Resident Evil 2, Leon's desk has joke glasses with a nose on it, as well as a misspelled Welcome Leon sign that contains an extra L. This was fixed and alluded to in the Resident Evil 2 remake. In Resident Evil 2, Leon is able to shoot the camera using his shotgun. In 2003, a company named Raylight Studios released a prototype demo of Resident Evil 2 featuring Leon and gave him the best walk animation he's ever had. The reason his gun is referred to as the Matilda is as a reference to the movie Leon the Professional, where the main characters were named Leon and Matilda. The face models for both Leon and Ashley were in a commercial for the Wii version of Resident Evil 4. When you equip Leon with his Mafia costume, his knife changes into a switchblade. Throughout Resident Evil 4, Leon throws his knife several times, but funny enough, this type of knife is not meant to be thrown, being both unbalanced and not aerodynamic at all. Aside from Ada, the only woman Leon has ever flirted with is Hunnigan.
Thanks. You know you're kinda cute without those glasses. Give me your number when I get back.
May I remind you that you're still on duty?
One version of Resident Evil 4 took place in Oswald Spencer's mansion, but it was reused for Resident Evil 5 Lost in Nightmares DLC. When Ada stabs Leon in the leg and he recovers with no issues, this could possibly be a life-threatening injury in real life, since you have a major artery right around that area, though it is possible that his infection with Las Plagas made him able to withstand it. For unknown reasons, Leon was not included as a playable character in the 3DS Mercenaries game. Speculation says he was possibly going to be added as a DLC character, but this was never confirmed. Leon appears as a playable character in Project X Zone for the 3DS, along with Chris and Jill. Throughout the entirety of the series, Leon and Jill have never met in any game. At the beginning of Resident Evil 6, Leon is forced to shoot the zombified president. This is not Ashley's father, but he was very good friends with both Leon and Cherry. The early promotional material for Degeneration featured Leon in his Resident Evil 4 jacket and used a different model of both him and Claire. Leon's partner Angela from Degeneration and Helena in Resident Evil 6 are both played by Laura Bailey and have very similar personalities and backstories.
No more tears! Not until I avenge your death. All right, Curtis. Let's finish this.
Resident Evil 4 went through many concepts, including one version that was recycled and used for Devil May Cry, which is responsible for the similarities between Leon and Dante. In Damnation, during the motorcycle sequence, Leon blows up several vehicles in order to kill some BOWs, but presumably also killed all the innocent people driving them. On April 11, 2020, Paul Haddad, the original voice of Leon Kennedy, passed away. In 2004, Capcom released a line of clothing called Leon's Collection that was based on his clothing from the games. This also included his own cologne fragrance. A scrapped concept of Leon from 1.5 had him paired with a bloodhound. In the trial version of Resident Evil 2, there are several unused lines of dialogue, including him telling Ada to hold her fire.
Hold your fire!
A blooper.
No, that sounds so stupid now. Okay, I really enjoy being with you.
A longer version of the conversation with Leon and Marvin.
Leon, if I die, you have to shoot me in the head. I don't think I'm going to make it.
Don't talk like that! Hey!
If you don't, I'll become one of them. You can't let that happen.
And an unused death scream.
Ah!
Leon is a terrible driver. He has crashed a squad car, a second police car, a boat, a helicopter, and a commercial airplane. He's great on a jet ski, though.
I know, just hold on.
I decided to take a look back at the original game and talk about some secrets and Easter eggs that you may or may not be aware of. I tried really hard to research and find the most obscure things I could, but I also wanted to keep in the ones we all know and love. I'll also be including Easter eggs from all versions of the original, since some secrets are only found in certain ports. And with that, let's head back to Raccoon City with Leon and Claire. These are the top 10 Resident Evil 2 secrets and Easter eggs.
Number 10.
Gold Emblem.
Leon!
When you reach the STAR's office, you can see a great Easter egg that most people probably skip right over. In Resident Evil 1, one of the key items that you need to progress in the mansion is a gold emblem. If you look closely, right next to Jill's desk, there is a box containing none other than that emblem. How exactly it got back after, well... yeah, nobody knows. Maybe Barry or Rebecca held onto it? Actually, while we're in the STAR's office, let's look at a bonus Easter egg. Behind Rebecca's desk on the bulletin board, on the wall there is a picture, which, when examined closely, is actually a picture from Back to the Future 3, because you can't get more random than that.
Number 9.
Arukas. Near the beginning of the game in the first scenario, there is a storefront in the background called Arukas. Flipping around Arukas spells out Sakura, which is the name of a character in Street Fighter, also made by Capcom.
Number 8.
Change soda machine. Throughout the RPD, there is not one single bathroom, which is interesting considering the vast number of vending machines you can find. But the vending machines have an interesting bit of controversy behind them. Depending on which version of the game you have, you may notice some differences between the vending machines in the game. In the original PS1 release of the game, there were various machines labeled what appears to be Cocoa Soda, written in a very familiar font and put on a blue can. Given the success of the game, it didn't take long before Coca-Cola dropped a lawsuit, telling Capcom to change the machines. After that, with the release of the DualShock version and all subsequent releases, the machines were all changed to a generic soda. And in some cases, machines were changed entirely, like the one in the hall where Sherry runs away from Leon.
Number 7.
Beta Liquorhead. In the beta version of Resident Evil 2, no, not 1.5, the actual beta, there was a different cutscene for the liquor which was far less dramatic. In this beta cutscene, a zombie's head falls from the ceiling, causing you to look up and be greeted with a liquor dropping down. While we were given the infinitely cooler cutscene in the final version, there is still remnants of this beta version if you look closely. This only occurs the first time you meet the liquor, but if you look closely from this camera angle, you can see the zombie's head is still there above. If you leave and come back, it disappears.
Number 6.
Dead Hunter. In Resident Evil 2, there are no hunters present throughout the game, but if you happen to play the N64 port of the game, you can find one dead. Once you get to the second scenario and you have entered both Leon's and Claire's fingerprints into the locked laboratory security door, inside you will find an already dead hunter. What's especially interesting about this hunter is that it didn't officially appear in any game as an enemy until Resident Evil Outbreak in 2003.
Number 5.
Burger Kong. Apparently, Burger King isn't as strict as Coca-Cola. This hidden Easter egg is pretty visible in a few places in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, but it's actually first seen in Resident Evil 2. In the RPD office through the double blue doors, there's a sneaky zombie hanging out on the floor hoping you'll just run past him and he doesn't have to take a bite out of your foot. Most players do exactly that, but did you know there's a secret camera angle here? If you kill the zombie on the floor and return, you're treated to an alternate camera angle that reveals the logo. Bam.
Number 4.
Spelling mistake. With translations are bound to be mistakes, especially when a game is being made in a country that doesn't primarily speak English. Resident Evil is no exception. When you reach the final boss in the first scenario, you may have been too busy fighting off William Burkin to notice, but if you look closely at the writing on the floor, you can see that the word elevator is actually misspelled. At least it's not as bad as when they misspelled Revelations on the actual game cases, right?
Number 3.
The locked door. Okay, so this might just be me, but hopefully you were confused about this as well. As you approach the statue puzzle in the RPD, there's a door that seems to have blood or red or something on it and is unopenable. Unlike Silent Hill, where 80% of the doors are forever locked, Resident Evil doors are pretty much all openable, except for this one. As far as I know, this is the only door in the whole game that you can't open. My first time playing this, my 12-year-old brain wondered about so many things that could be behind the door, and then one day I decided to take a look at the map, and I realized I had already been on the other side. The red on the door is actually from this light, and the door has a hole in it, which Sherry crawls through. The reason the door is unopenable is because it's nailed shut on the other side. Not technically an Easter egg, but man did that bother me for so many years.
Number 2.
Shooting the screen. I did say I'd be mentioning ones we know and love, right? For those of you who don't know, in Resident Evil 2, there are a few places in the game where if Leon is angled at exactly the right way and points his shotgun at the screen, you can actually see bullet holes appear as if he shot the camera. It's not clear why they included this little egg, but it's oddly charming and satisfying. I also don't know of any other game that's ever included something like this, but either way it's awesome and we don't know why.
Number 1.
The secret angle. Okay, so everybody probably knows about this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Once you've killed the zombies in the area, go to the front of the RPD entrance. When facing away from the RPD, move towards the far wall. If you keep walking or running for a few seconds, the angle will switch, revealing an area only accessible in Resident Evil 3. It's unconfirmed, but apparently this was going to be an area for the player, but had to be scrapped due to time constraints, though it was brought back in Resident Evil 3. Ever since she made her debut in Resident Evil 2, Claire has been a staple of the series and is still one of the most beloved characters in the Resident Evil franchise. Here are 50 facts about Claire Redfield. In Resident Evil 2, Claire's face was based on Neve Campbell. From Code Veronica onward, her face was based on a mix of actresses, mainly of Liv Tyler. Claire is 5'6", or 169 centimeters. Her blood type is O. When she was younger, both her parents died, which led to Chris taking care of her and why they are such close siblings. It was in university that she developed her love of motorcycle customization and, at that point, already owned 2 bikes of her own. While she was in college, she was known to be a little bit boy crazy and dated a lot of men at the same time. I guess that explains her crush on Leon. Claire would regularly come to Raccoon City to meet Chris, and during these visits is when he would train her in combat. When she wasn't able to get in touch with Chris, she went to Raccoon City to check on him, which is how she ended up there during the events of Resident Evil 2. Even though her disc is marked as Disc 2, the canon scenarios for the original Resident Evil 2 are Claire A, Leon B. Claire's signature handgun is the Browning HP and is one of the most widely used military pistols in history. The insignia on her vest that says Made in Heaven is actually a reference to the band Queen from the song and album of the same name. Claire was the only character played by the same voice actor for most of the games.
See, I say a word, and then Molly thinks of a word that sounds like it.
The main voice actor for Claire, Allison Court, also starred as Lunette on The Big Comfy Couch, as well as Lydia from the animated Beetlejuice series.
Happy anniversary, Beetlejuice.
Oh boy!
Comic book fans will also know her as Jubilee from X-Men.
What's anybody waiting for? He needs us!
Revelations 2 is the first time Allison Court did not reprise the role of Claire. The voice actress is still unknown due to the fact that she used a pseudonym to be able to do non-union work, being credited as James Baker. In 2012, there was a browser game called Onimusha Soul, which featured Ada, Jill, and Claire in a flowery samurai aesthetic. In the beta of Code Veronica, she is seen wearing a ripped version of her Resident Evil 2 outfit. She also had another outfit with pink jeans before her final outfit was put into the game. Originally, Code Veronica was centered around Jill going to Umbrella's European base, but with Resident Evil 3 in development, they decided Jill would star in that game and put Claire into the leading role of Code Veronica instead. A 5-series manga called Biohazard Heavenly Island features Claire and serves as a tie-in for both Revelations 2 and Resident Evil Umbrella Corps. In Code Veronica, Claire's Let Me Live insignia is also a reference to a Queen song from the album Made in Heaven. While most people know of her Let Me Live insignia debuting in Code Veronica, it actually first appeared in Resident Evil 2 on her alternate unlockable costume. Claire is 1 year younger than Rebecca Chambers, but this might be a continuity error in the series. Barry Burton is a close friend of Claire's. In Resident Evil 6, Claire was the only character from Resident Evil 2 not to return. The main reason for her being replaced by Helena was because she was in Revelations 2 and couldn't be in 2 games taking place that close together at the same time. In Resident Evil Outbreak, there's an SP item called Hotel Register and has her name on the list of past guests. Claire has a cameo as a zombie in a painting in Beautiful Joe Double Trouble for the DS along with Steve Burnside. In the CG movie Degeneration, there is a flashback that shows her using a shotgun, which is interesting since she was never able to equip or use a shotgun in that game. Claire was an unlockable character in the game Trickin' Snowboarder, along with Leon and a zombie. Revelations 2 is the first and only time in the game series that she doesn't have her hair in a ponytail. In Code Veronica, when playing as Steve, if you come back to Claire before clearing out the area, she will comment depending on a few factors.
You're not done yet.
When fighting Nosferatu, there is a secret kill cutscene if you can finish him with a knife. Only seen in the battle mode results screen, Claire will be wearing a tight red leather bodysuit complete with a matching motorcycle. Claire is one of the characters in the novel Resident Evil Underworld, which is an original story by S.D. Perry. Just like Tomb Raider, when Code Veronica was released, there were rumors of a cheat code that would make Claire appear nude in the game. This cheat does not exist. There were 1,800 special edition Code Veronica Dreamcasts released that came in the color Claire Redfield Red. The closest Claire gets to a mutual romantic relationship is with Neil from Revelations 2. It's never stated explicitly that they are a couple, but the game does heavily suggest it a few times. In Resident Evil 2, Claire is able to casually kick zombies' heads off. In real life, the amount of force needed to detach a human head is pretty much impossible to reach, and even if you could, it would probably result in your leg breaking. Claire appears as a card in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Heroes and Heralds mode. Also in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, one of Sea Viper's palette swaps is based on Claire. In the RPG card game called Minato Biohazard Clanmaster, Claire has a leather outfit modeled after Hunk. Claire's Made in Heaven insignia first actually appeared in one of Chris's unlockable outfits in the first game. This jacket can also be seen hanging at his desk in the STARS office. In Revelations 2, Claire makes a joke about almost being a Claire sandwich, in reference to the infamous Jill sandwich line.
Yeah, I was almost a Claire sandwich.
Barry, tell everyone that story.
The license plate on her motorcycle says Made in Heaven in the remake. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, Claire has the opportunity to use a working phone twice. First is the payphone at the gas station, and the second is the phone that Chief Iron calls on later in the game. In Gun Survivor 2, Claire gets to fight the Nemesis. In the original Resident Evil 2, she rides a 1970s-era Ducati 500 GT. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, she rides a Harley-Davidson FX STB Night Train. Even though she wasn't in the game, Claire appeared in the live-action promos for Resident Evil 5. In the early version of Resident Evil 2, Claire was originally known as Elza Walker. She isn't considered a unique character, just a prototype of Claire, and retains pretty much all of her original backstory. The only major change to her aside from her appearance was her relationship with Chris. And lastly, Claire's favorite food is cheeseburgers.
Hello?
I've always said that the real main character of every Resident Evil game is the location it takes place in. The Raccoon City Police Department building is one of the most iconic locations in the entire franchise. So today I thought it would be fun to take yet another trip into the RPD, this time seeing what we can uncover within its walls. And with that, here are 50 facts about the RPD. The RPD was first established in 1969 after the former art museum was purchased and converted into a police station. The RPD is a playable area in Resident Evil 2, 3, Outbreak File 2, Darkside Chronicles, Operation Raccoon City, Umbrella Corps, and the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. Just like the mansion, the RPD has themed locks and keys, this time using the motif of playing cards, using the 4 suites of Heart, Diamond, Spade, and Club. In addition to this, in Outbreak File 2 there is also a Joker key. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, while Claire requires it, the Diamond key is completely optional for Leon. The only real item he misses is one of the portable safes. In the first release of Resident Evil 2, the vending machines had a photo that said Chocha Cola in the same font as Coca-Cola. This resulted in a cease and desist from Coca-Cola, and the cans were replaced with black blank ones, and in some cases the machines were just replaced entirely. Outside of the second floor exterior of the East office, you can see there are 2 windows, but if you go into the hallway, there are 3. This error was corrected in the remake. The questionable art hanging around the RPD was chosen by Chief Irons. He used the bribe money that Annette gave him to buy it all. The RPD's police force consists of 3 different units: the Patrol Division, who is responsible for round-the-clock service on foot and makes up the majority of the officers, the SWAT team, and of course, Special Tactics and Rescue Service, or STARS. The explanation for ammo and weapons being scattered throughout the police station instead of being in the weapons locker room is due to an order given by Chief Irons. He gave this order on September 25th, before the city had been completely overrun. This led to a large number of officers dying due to a lack of ammo and weapons. The reason there are lickers in the RPD is due to a specific genetic mutation occurring in some zombies, causing them to further mutate after being killed. Because Resident Evil 3 starts before Resident Evil 2, Jill enters and leaves the RPD before Claire and Leon even arrive in the city. The RPD had a canine unit, which was infected by the T-virus. This is why there's Dobermans in the station, specifically in the basement where they were stationed. The air ducts that Sherry uses to get around the RPD are leftovers of the old building design. They no longer work, but they also weren't sealed up, allowing for not only Sherry to go through them, but several Outbreak characters as well as some monsters. While most of the original art and decor was changed when the building was being renovated, the statue of the woman in the main hall is one of the only remaining art pieces from when the building was originally a museum. There were reports of 8 young women who went missing in Raccoon City, and it's heavily implied that the secret taxidermy room was used to desecrate the girls' bodies. On top of this, the presence of chloroform implies that not all of the girls were dead when he did it. If you use the cord to block the shutters in one of the hallways, in Scenario A that hall will remain safe permanently, but in Scenario B the zombies will eventually break through regardless. The reason stairs were added to the East office was due to an error in the original Resident Evil 2, where the room didn't take into account the height difference provided by the ramp in the main hall. In Scenario A in the original Resident Evil 2, if you don't kill Marvin as a zombie, he will show up in the next character's B scenario. Hanging next to Chris's desk is a leather jacket with the same insignia as Claire on the back. This is also one of the alternate costumes he wears in the original Resident Evil. On Jill's desk in the original Resident Evil 2, the description says the photo on her desk is most likely her boyfriend. In the remakes, the photo has been changed to a picture of a dog. In Resident Evil 1.5, the police station had a completely different design, resembling a more modern precinct. It also included several areas protected by large shutters, originally designed to protect the station in case of riots. In Resident Evil 3, Jill comes across an unconscious Marvin. When examined, Jill says he is fatally wounded, implying that she believed there was no way to save him. A big reason for this confusion is also due to shoddy translation. In the original Resident Evil 2, only on normal difficulty, if the player reaches the RPD without picking up any items, Brad will be walking around as a zombie outside of the precinct. When killed, he will drop a special key that can be used in the dark room to unlock outfits for Leon, as well as one outfit and a special handgun for Claire. In Scenario A, once the special key has been obtained from Brad, he will automatically appear in the same area in Scenario B. In the East Hall, you can see the word Red Rum painted onto a boarded up door, which is murder spelled backwards. This is a reference to The Shining. The main hall has always been void of enemies and considered a giant save room. It wasn't until Darkside Chronicles that we ever saw any enemies in there. Right before the events of Resident Evil 2, the RPD was in the middle of upgrading uniforms with armor, due to the recent riots. This is why Leon's uniform has a different look to the other officers. When Claire leaves the STARS office, a fax is received. While it probably wouldn't have done much, she could have theoretically sent a fax asking for help or at least explaining the situation. In the speedrunning community, the STARS office is infamous for ruining runs if the player gets the Magnum instead of the grenade launcher. The reason for this is mainly due to Magnum ammo being more difficult to make over freeze rounds as well as taking up more inventory space. In Resident Evil 3, several doors in the RPD are boarded up. While it was obviously to keep the player contained, it would have meant that someone had to remove the boards before Leon and Claire arrived, but it's never properly explained. In the East office, there is a parody logo for a burger place named Burger Kong. In the STARS office, if you search Wesker's messy desk 50 times, you will find a roll of film. Head down to the darkroom and develop it to get the Easter egg photo of Rebecca Chambers. In the Desperate Times scenario, there are 2 prisoners in the cell next to Ben's, named Samuel and Nathan. They were both arrested for robbing a gun shop. Interestingly, they are no longer in their cell once Leon and Claire arrive at the RPD. The nerve gas released throughout the Desperate Times scenario is explained in the police notice file. Using sensors, it detects an ID tag, but apparently it was still being tested, which could explain why it activates even when playing as Kevin. While it may seem like it activates randomly, it actually has a set pattern depending on what difficulty you're on. In the Resident Evil 3 remake, when playing as Carlos, if you go out of your way to examine things, he will provide commentary.
Somebody didn't have time to put his blues on.
Including this fan favorite line.
Now here's a weird fucking door.
Leave it! We're here for Bard.
In the West office, one of the lockers says JoJo on it. This is a reference to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. If you look closely at the sign that says Welcome Leon, you can notice that it's misspelled, with welcome being spelled with 2 L's. This is referenced in the remake, with a space being where the second L would be, as well as the L being on a desk. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, the computer in the STARS office uses a USB drive. However, USB drives weren't invented until 1999, 1 year after the game takes place. There is a chance that STARS had access to a proprietary version of them, but that's just speculation. In the basement, there's an optional weapon storage room filled with ammo. In this room is a locker containing a submachine gun and a side pack, which gives you 2 extra inventory spaces. You can choose to take these items or leave them for your other character's second scenario. Only in Leon's scenario, he is able to slide down a chute and end up in the basement. This was removed in the remake, most likely because it didn't make any sense for a chute to be there. In the RPD, there is one door that cannot be opened. Many players wondered what was on the other side, not realizing they had already seen it. If you look at the map, you can see that this is the door Sherry crawls under during this cutscene. Chief Irons was known for his taxidermy hobby, and he had a lot of animals on display as trophies. Among these is a tiger. However, by 1975, tigers were already on the endangered species list, so having a dead tiger on display would be highly illegal. Before you enter the RPD, there's a secret camera angle at the front gate, though the area is still inaccessible. In the STARS office, near Rebecca's desk is a bulletin board with photos. Upon closer inspection, you can see the photo is characters from the movie Back to the Future 3. In Resident Evil 2, a mode called Extreme Battle Mode was added where the player would need to find 4 virus-destroying bombs in the RPD. This mode has Chris as a playable character and is the only time in the series we actually see Chris in the RPD. Exclusive to the Nintendo 64 version of Resident Evil 2 are the extra files called EX files. Several of these can be found in the RPD, including Jill's note, which is a transcript of her Resident Evil 3 opening monologue, Jill's report, a summary of the BOWs she encountered at the mansion, City Pamphlet, which has the mayor's praise of the city's relationship with Umbrella, Brad's note, where he laments about Nemesis coming after him, Rebecca's note, where she talks about Billy's case requesting it to be closed, and also misspelling his last name, and Chris's report, where he details the entire events of the first game. In the Resident Evil 2 remake, there are new rolls of film added, called hiding places, showing photos where the player could find hidden items. One of these shows Wesker's desk drawer, where you can find the Magnum parts as Leon or submachine gun parts as Claire. It's also worth noting if you search his desk again, you will find the photo of Rebecca once more. The second photo shows the press room where Leon can find some flamethrower fuel or needle cartridges if you're Claire. The safe in the East office is the only safe in the original Resident Evil 2, and the combination for it is 2236. In Resident Evil Apocalypse, there's a very noticeable continuity error in the scene where Jill enters the RPD. If you watch closely, you can see that she actually reloads her pistol twice. In Resident Evil 2, the RPD infamously didn't have a bathroom in the entire building. It wasn't until 20 years later in the Resident Evil 2 remake that they finally added one, even using it to flood the hallway and create some nice atmosphere. It is also worth noting that there actually is a bathroom in the original Resident Evil 2, not in the RPD, but actually in the tram. Offering the unique perspective of a child during a zombie outbreak, Sherry Burkin was introduced in Resident Evil 2, and even though we haven't seen as much of her as we'd like, she has been an integral character behind the scenes of the Resident Evil storyline. Now, for characters like Sherry who aren't as prominent in the series, I can't easily make a list of 50 facts, so instead let me introduce the first of a new shorter format lists. Here are 25 facts about Sherry Burkin. In Resident Evil 2, if you play Leon A, Claire B, Sherry never gets infected with the G-Virus, meaning that the canon scenario layout must be Claire A, Leon B. Her outfit in the original game is a modified version of a type of Japanese schoolgirl uniform known as Sailor Fuku, but with shorts instead of a skirt. In the Resident Evil 2 remake, Sherry's locket was changed to no longer contain a sample of the G-Virus, as it always has. Instead, it functions as a special backup key to open a chamber that contains samples of the G-Virus. Sherry was born in 1986, making her 12 years old during the events of Resident Evil 2. Sherry's blood type is O. Sherry is especially hated by speedrunners due to the fact that she has a completely random chance of dropping her leg while climbing up. She also forces Claire to move a bit slower, since if Claire gets too far ahead of her, she sits on the floor until you come back to get her. This tradition is carried on in the remake, since Sherry's section of the game can be easily ruined if you make a mistake. In 1999, in Japan only, a drama album was released, and among the tracks was one called The Little Runaway Sherry, which tells an alternate story where, after escaping the lab, Claire and Leon are confronted by men trying to steal the G-Virus, but Sherry escapes into the forest and meets another girl named Meg, and they escape together. This story is not canon. In the S.D. Perry novelization of Resident Evil 2, Sherry is featured prominently as a character in the book and given a much bigger spotlight. Even though they had a close bond in the game, Sherry has never reunited with Claire in any other game since Resident Evil 2, which is odd since she has reunited with Leon and even Ada in Resident Evil 6.
Leon?
Sherry?
In Darkside Chronicles, Sherry is voiced by Laura Bailey, who also voiced Angela Miller in Degeneration and Helena Harper in Resident Evil 6. The original voice actress for Sherry is Lisa J, credited as Lisa Yamanaka, and is an advocate for actors with disabilities, even receiving an award from the City of Toronto for her work. Since Lisa was a child herself during the recording, the voice director did not tell her specifically what happened to Sherry in order to protect her from the more mature implications of it all. In case there was any confusion, the way that William injects his embryo into Sherry is via the mouth through forced ingestion, and the embryo attaches to the internal organs before consuming them, as demonstrated by Ben and Chief Irons. In the scrapped Resident Evil 1.5, Sherry had a different appearance, looking even younger and lacking a headband. There's also suggestion that she had no relation to William or Annette. Also, instead of constantly running away from Claire, she served as more of a helper by unlocking doors for her by crawling through vents. She also spends most of the game with the scrapped character, John. In Resident Evil Outbreak, there is an SP item called Silver Framed Photo Stand that can be found within the Umbrella Labs. The description says it's a photo of Sherry and Annette. Sherry and Jake have a lot of parallels, including their fathers William Burkin and Albert Wesker both being evil Umbrella employees that are obsessed with research, as well as both of them being hunted for their blood. Jake's for the cure to the C-Virus, and Sherry for her G-Virus antibodies. Unlike the original game, where Sherry can be killed by dogs, flying bugs, and zombies, in the Resident Evil 2 remake, she is virtually invincible, and the only enemy she ever has to deal with is Chief Irons. In addition to this, she has a unique game over screen saying "You are trapped" instead of the usual "You died." In Resident Evil 6, Sherry has a lot of gameplay advantages over other characters, since her quickshot ability is the fastest, and her contextual melee attacks are the most varied. She is also equipped with a burst handgun that fires 3 rounds and a stun rod that shocks enemies, making it very easy for Sherry to kick some serious ass. Despite her youthful appearance in Resident Evil 6, Sherry is actually older than Piers, Helena, and Jake. Carla Radams was responsible for engineering the C virus and used Sherry's G virus laced blood to do it. After Claire left Sherry with Leon, Sherry ended up first in government custody and then lived under close watch with Derek Simmons, mainly to protect her from people like Wesker and other threats. In Resident Evil 6, there is a file called Life Without Freedom that details how during her protective custody with Simmons, Claire came to visit, as well as visiting as often as she could to offer emotional support during all of the tests and experiments that Sherry had to suffer through. Claire was also the only civilian trusted to know where Sherry was being kept. It wasn't until Wesker was killed that she was allowed into a more normal life and consequently was offered a position within the BSAA as a security operative. After being infected with the G virus and then being given the vaccine, Sherry was given lifelong regenerative abilities, allowing her to rapidly heal. Among her new abilities are the ability to heal injuries, though the more severe the injury, the more exhausted she becomes while healing. She also has extreme resistance to pretty much all viruses, basically being immune to them. And she also stopped aging around 20 years old and will most likely retain her youthful appearance as long as she lives.
What the hell?
Is she good? Is she evil? Nobody really knows the truth about Ada, but hopefully this video can shed some light on her. From her boy toy Leon to her insanely expensive wig, here are 50 facts about Ada Wong. In the early version of Resident Evil 2, known as 1.5, Ada was originally a scientist named Linda, but still had the same personality and was still a double agent. The biggest inspiration for her archetype was the character La Femme Nikita, with both characters being amazing spies with their biggest flaw being unable to resist feelings for a man they care about. In Ada's case, that man is Leon. She is 5'7". Ada is half Chinese, half American. Her blood type is AB. In Hong Kong and Taiwan, there was a manga series that was released, and in the second volume, we got to see the only glimpse of Ada's past where, as a child in a war-torn nation, she has to scavenge for food and she nearly kills another kid with a shotgun, but takes pity on him and lets him keep the food. Later in this manga series, Ada becomes impregnated by a monster only for Leon to become a bioweapon similar to William in order to save her. It should go without mention that this isn't canon, especially since this version of Leon is named Leon Scoot Kennedy. While she appeared in ads fully rendered, Ada never appeared in any of the FMVs in the original Resident Evil 2 because her model wasn't finished in time for the game's release. Aside from the Darkside Chronicles, which is no longer considered canon, Ada and Claire have never met officially. Ada got most of her training as a spy while working for a Chinese crime syndicate in the black market for arms dealers. Ada's main involvement in espionage is with a group simply known as the Organization, who was Umbrella's main competitor. Even though she has worked for several different private employers, she has a reputation for betraying them. Ada tends to do whatever she feels is right based on the information she has at the time. In typical Capcom fashion, Ada has had a lot of changes to her story, mainly in her death in Resident Evil 2. In the original, she could die in two different ways depending on which scenario you were playing. One by falling to her death, and one by being thrown against a panel. In the original story, Ada got close to a researcher named John and became his girlfriend in order to gain access to Umbrella research. This was entirely scrapped in the remake, simply having her pose as an FBI agent. The John Ada password in the first game is not only responsible for her name, but also what caused her entire backstory to be written. According to character designer Kazunori Kadoi, the reason Ada was given a trench coat in the remake was that having her just walking around in a red dress seemed a little bit too unrealistic, especially for a spy. The last name Wong may be a reference to the actress Anna May Wong, who was known for embodying the Dragon Lady trope. This role always tends to be a mysterious and seductive Asian woman who typically is either deceitful or domineering. As cool as her grapple gun is, it wouldn't be able to exist in real life as it does in the game. Just like Batman's grapple gun, the amount of power and structural stability it would need to lift a person simply wouldn't be possible without being extremely large. The hookshot from Resident Evil 0 is probably a much more accurate representation of how big it would need to be, and even then, it most likely wouldn't be able to pull you up very quickly. In the data files for Resident Evil 4, there is suggestion that Ada's grapple gun would have been usable during regular gameplay, but how it would have functioned is unknown. The first time we got to see Ada use her grappling hook was when Wesker gave it to her in Umbrella Chronicles to help her get out of the city. The soundtrack for Umbrella Chronicles features Ada on the cover art. Ada was added as a playable character in the free-to-play mobile game Puzzle Fighter, but the game was shut down 2 months after she debuted. In the Resident Evil films, Ada is played by the Chinese actress Li Bingbing. The wig that she wore during the film reportedly cost over $7,000. Li tried her best to learn her lines in English before shooting, but was actually dubbed over by Sally Cahill, the original voice of Ada, though she wasn't credited for this.
How do you think Umbrella populates these test scenarios? Hundreds of people dead each time they run a simulation.
How do you think Umbrella populates these test scenarios? Hundreds of people dead each time they run a simulation.
Kelly Hu was one of the candidates to play Ada in the live-action films. The real reason Ada survived Raccoon City is because she had a tissue sample from William. In exchange for recovering it, she was warned about the missile strike approaching Raccoon City by Wesker, who helped her get out. When Ada and Leon first met in the RPD parking garage, Leon yelled, "Hold your fire," but the line was removed in favor of silence.
Hold your fire!
Aside from Claire, Ada is the only character to use an automatic bowgun in the entire series. In the first releases of Resident Evil 4, Ada's model was not rigged for certain animations. When swapped, attempting to do certain animations resulted in probably the craziest glitch in all of Resident Evil. Luis Serra was responsible for leaking information about Las Plagas, which made its way to Wesker, who then sent it to Krauser and Ada on their respective missions to steal it. In Resident Evil 4, Ada was given orders by Wesker to kill Leon, but chose to ignore those orders since she still has feelings for him. By avoiding Leon and running away from him, she was actually keeping him safe, telling Wesker that she just never had the chance to assassinate him. Ada rang the bell in the village in order to help Leon when he was being overwhelmed by enemies. The title screen for Separate Ways was inspired by the TV series La Femme Nikita. While there is a running joke about Leon being a little dumb or gullible, Ada actually views him as very smart, to the point of calling him practically a genius in one of her reports in Resident Evil 4. Also in one of Ada's reports, she reveals that she double-crossed Wesker, giving him a fake sample while keeping the real one for the organization, all of which was done following their orders. At the end of Resident Evil Damnation, which takes place before 6, you can see Ada talking to Simmons at the end of the movie. The art book for Resident Evil Damnation includes a section called Ada's Report, in which she details her analysis of all the monsters she's ever encountered. Due to the Resident Evil movie storyline, the game studio was under strict rules to avoid the mention of clones. This is largely why the storyline of Resident Evil 6 became so confusing. By claiming Carla was a doppelganger of Ada rather than a clone, they were able to differentiate it, but it left a lot of fans a bit confused regardless, since Carla and the various Ada types were all virtually identical to the real Ada. While Ada also has her solo campaign in Resident Evil 6, a patch was added where you could play co-op with a character simply called Agent. This character has no backstory and is simply there for gameplay purposes. Just like Leon, those around Ada tend to develop romantic or lustful feelings for her, especially her bosses like Derek Simmons, who became absolutely obsessed with her. Carla Radams first appears in the Marhawa Desires manga along with Piers. The actual story behind Carla's transformation into Ada is more sinister than it seems. Carla trusted Simmons and let her guard down, allowing him to experiment on her with the C virus, not knowing that he was not only altering her body, but also her mind. He focused on giving her Ada's personality and traits, which caused her to literally believe that she was Ada. After this, Simmons treated her as if she was the real Ada. I think obsessed might be an understatement. At the University of Salzburg, an analysis of Ada was done and she was considered a gender-fluid character, with traits physically assigned to male characters like strength, intelligence, and a dominant personality, while also having typical feminine qualities such as beauty and poise. In Street Fighter V, the character Colin is able to wear Ada's outfits as DLC content. Shinji Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil, has gone on record saying that he finds Ada to be manipulative, especially to Leon. The same way Leon rose from rookie cop to elite agent, her involvement in the Raccoon City incident made her a legend in the espionage world. In Japan, there was an audio drama released called The Female Spy is Alive, which takes place a few days after Resident Evil 2. In this story, Ada intercepts Sherry's locket being delivered to a village in France, killing Hunk and his team while also surviving an accidental T-virus outbreak. The most noteworthy thing about this audio drama is that it ends with Ada realizing her true feelings for Leon and deciding to quit being a spy so that she can be with him. While we got to see what happened afterwards, the way that she actually survived the fall in Resident Evil 2 has never been officially explained. This also goes for her other death where she is smashed against the panel by Mr. X and literally died in Leon's arms. The only thing I found is that Wesker was the one who saved her, as mentioned in Wesker's report, though he doesn't specify how he saved her. While it's the name that we know her as, Ada Wong is just a pseudonym and her real identity remains a mystery. Whether you're a fan of the original Resident Evil 2 or part of the newer generation of gamers playing it for the first time, we can all agree that Resident Evil 2 Remake is an amazing game. Since we're gearing up for the release of Resident Evil 3 Remake, I thought this would be a great time to bring you my list of developer secrets and Easter eggs for Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Fuck! What the fuck?!
Number 10.
Nods and references. Throughout the entirety of the game are tons of references to both the original game and other games in Capcom's library. Here are some of the ones I found. At the beginning of the second scenario, you can see Brad Vickers on a poster in the guard room. Only natural that they would choose the bravest member of STARS to be the face of the RPD. At the beginning of the game, there's graffiti with the letters TP. This one might be a stretch, but there's speculation that this graffiti at the beginning may be a reference to PT. Another character reference can be found across the street from Kendo's gun shop, Mikhail's Pierogies, referencing our man Mikhail, who is in Resident Evil 3. The tiny mannequin on the desk where you get the spade key is a shrunken version of the mannequins in Resident Evil 7. You can also find them in the storage room on the 3rd floor when playing as Claire. Early in the game is a poster that references Dead Rising. Sort of. I'm not sure why they didn't use his real name, but you can see a poster that has the name Frank East on it as a photographer available for hire, which is all very obvious reference to Frank West. Speaking of Frank West, did you know that the voice of William Burkin is TJ Rotolo, the same voice actor as Frank West?
She is my creation!
I've covered wars, you know.
When you get to the RPD office, you can see that the big banner that says Welcome Leon has a space missing after the L. If you inspect one of the desks, you can see that there is another L that was taken down. This is a nod to the original Resident Evil 2, where Welcome Leon was accidentally spelled with 2 L's. In the orphanage, you can see a few stuffed animals, including a big, cuddly stuffed alligator under the stairs. Comparing it to the sewer gator is a nod to the giant alligator later in the game. This was a recycled asset from Resident Evil 7 as well. While we are here, if we turn around and look at the chalkboard, you can see a drawing of Lottie, Natalia's bear from Revelations 2. While there aren't any giant spiders in the game, if you look at a few points in the sewers, you can see remnants of giant spiderwebs hanging from the ceiling. And lastly, we have Wesker. Well, sort of. No matter how hard you listen, you can't make out anything through the radio static, but that is Wesker speaking to Ada in this cutscene.
Number 9.
Gas station. I decided to make a whole entry just for the gas station because it's the most Easter egg dense area in the whole game. First are the license plates to each character's vehicles. On Leon's Jeep is the word Matilda, which refers to his signature handgun, named as a reference to the movie Leon the Professional. Then Claire's license plate, which is the release date of the original Resident Evil 2. You can see this date a second time as a phone number on the door as you enter the gas station. Next to the entrance is a big ice cream container with herb ice cream that has the slogan, "It will heal you," and even includes the yellow herbs from Resident Evil 4. And lastly, if you wait a bit after exiting the back room, the sheriff will turn into a zombie and prevent you from going back in.
Number 8.
Out of Bounds. One of the only real glitches in the game gives you the ability to completely walk through walls, leave the map areas, and skip large portions of the game, though this can cause problems if not done carefully. This has been patched, but it's still possible to do in certain areas. To do this trick, get a zombie to crawl and grab your leg from behind while at the very first step of a staircase. The easiest place to do this is on the stairs of the library. If precise enough, the character will now be walking on air. Next, walk over to where you would normally fall through the second floor and you will go lower than intended, which allows you to leave the map. It's worth noting that you can also do this in the sewers and a couple other places in the game.
Number 7.
Second Orphanage. Speaking of out of bounds, there is actually a bit of a secret area in the game. Near the orphanage is a second orphanage that is unfinished. It was most likely a beta version of the level that accidentally got left in the game's data. There really isn't too much to see, but it is there, and it definitely has a different feel to the original and even has some textures. Based on the concept art, I'm guessing this room might have been a nursery, but I guess only the devs can confirm that.
Number 6.
Adaptive difficulty. Ever since Resident Evil 4, Capcom has used a secret sauce in their game design formula, and that is adaptive difficulty. So for those of you who don't know what that means, basically, the better you perform in the game, the harder it gets, and vice versa. Now the specifics of how it works exactly have always been a bit of an enigma in every game it's part of, but for Resident Evil 2, this is basically how it works. There are a few variables, but they typically revolve around how many times you are bitten and die, as well as how much ammo and healing items you have on you. Every time you take damage, the game gets a little bit easier in a lot of little ways, and if you're doing really well and not taking any damage, the game will get more and more difficult to keep you on your toes. As the difficulty changes, the amount of damage that enemies cause changes, the amount of bullets from mixing powders changes, and the game spawns more or less enemies, and the amount of health that enemies have will change as well. And for those wondering, adaptive difficulty is disabled on hardcore mode. It is automatically set to max for the whole run.
Number 5.
Tofu. I still see people getting surprised by this, so I thought it was worth mentioning. After you beat the game, you unlock the extra mode called the Fourth Survivor, where you get to play as Hunk. Beating this unlocks the Tofu Survivor mode, which is identical except that you play as a block of tofu equipped with only a knife. However, if you can beat this very difficult mode, you can unlock 2 extra tofu type characters, each with their own arsenal and gameplay style. First is Cognac. Cognac's arsenal is fire themed, consisting of a flamethrower with plenty of ammo, and a grenade launcher with flame rounds. In Japanese cuisine, cognac is a thick gelatinous block made from lime water and cognac flour, which is made from the large purple flower of the same name. I've had it, and honestly, it doesn't really taste like anything, maybe a tiny bit salty or fishy. The next unlocked character is Oito Mochi, whose arsenal consists of 36 hand grenades. Oito Mochi is just flavored mochi, which is a very stringy, chewy cake made from rice flour. It can be flavored with sakura blossoms, azuki beans, or in this case, green tea. If you beat this mode with either of these two, you will unlock the last 2 tofu types. First, we have Flan, whose extremely powerful arsenal consists of a minigun, spark shot, flash grenades, and a rocket launcher, and is by far the easiest character to beat this mode as. Now, you probably know what Flan is, but I should mention that Flan is called pudding in Japan. And last is Anin Tofu, who is equipped with a quick-draw army pistol and an M19, as well as tons of handgun ammo. Anin Tofu, or almond tofu, is a soft gelatinous dessert made from apricot kernel milk, agar, and sugar, and is one of my personal all-time favorite desserts. If you ever get a chance to try it, I highly recommend it.
Number 4.
Mr. X. One of the key enemies in the game needs no introduction and has caused more jump scares than anything else in the game. And there's good reason for this. Since the Mr. X of PS1 days, technology has come a long way, and Mr. X's ability to find the player was a standout feature. But you might be wondering exactly how his AI works. Well, for the most part, it works the same way you do. He has a sense of sight, sound, and touch, as well as the capability to search a room before moving to the next one. While this is terrifying, it can also work to your advantage if you know what you're doing. If positioned correctly, you can hide from him, and if you're stealthy enough, you can even follow him. By staying out of his field of vision and walking slowly, as long as he doesn't look in your direction, he won't sense you. But this comes with a cost, which is that the longer he goes without spotting you, the more sensitive and aggressive he gets. Sounds like running and kicking open doors can attract him, but the fastest way that he will find you is if you fire your gun, minus the machine gun if it's equipped with the silencer. So, if you want to avoid him, sometimes hiding in the corner might be your best option.
Number 3.
Audio. One of the most overlooked aspects in the Resident Evil 2 remake is the sound design. The original Resident Evil 2 was actually ahead of its time in the sound department, and the remake holds up that tradition. If you have never played the remake with a good pair of headphones, you are really missing out on some fantastic sound design. There are actually 3 simultaneous sound systems working together to create the overall experience. Utilizing a revolutionary new real-time binaural system, which is the first stereophonic sound system of its kind, the player is able to have sounds that can simultaneously sound close by and far away for each ear. The second system, dubbed the Impulse Response Creation, is a reverb system which modulates each sound you hear depending on the size and texture of whatever room you're in. So, while the back room of the gas station will sound intimate and warm, the RPD hall will be large and echoey. And last is the Dolby Atmos support, which is just to make sure the overall mixing of all the sounds is perfect. That way nothing is too loud or too quiet, and it shows. Seriously, the next time you play the game, put on a pair of headphones and just listen, and you will be able to really appreciate the work that went into the sound.
Number 2.
Unused Assets. As with any game, there are things that didn't make it in, but in this game it's a little bit different. While there are concepts that were never used, there are also a lot of assets hidden in the game's files that were never used or mentioned anywhere in the game. First, we have the unused enemy concepts. Among these are wheelchair zombies as well as what seems to be a zombie liquor hybrid. Neither of these enemies left the concept phase of production. The following, however, is all in the game's files. Mr. X has 2 unused animations, however it is possible to trigger them in the extra modes. They both relate to him being hit by the spark shot. He also has an unused instant kill animation where he throws the player down and then punches their head in. It's also worth mentioning that the model of Chris Redfield from Resident Evil 7 is also hidden in the game's files, but has no data or programming associated with him. And last, but probably most interesting, are the unused key items. In the icon for the DLC that unlocks everything, you can see a key that is never seen in the game. This is the Wolf Key, to which there is also an unused Eagle Key, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are about 50 items that went unused, most of which are blank models with no textures. These include almost every key item from the original, as well as some interesting ones like Leon's box, Claire's box, gunsmithing tool, continue coin, warhead tool, and so many other odd ones. I have a hunch that a few of these might be in the Resident Evil 3 remake, but we will have to see. I wish I could tell you more about them, but there's literally no data on these items.
Number 1.
Development. The last and possibly most interesting thing about the remake is seeing glimpses of its development cycle and all the changes the team made. Development started in August 2015, being worked on alongside Resident Evil 7, and during a roundtable conference special held by Capcom, they showed small clips of early development, which I compiled all the best parts of here. Early on, there is a lot of footage where they were testing out different types of fixed camera modes, which is nice to know that they did consider it at one point. There is also footage of the character going into a first-person mode as well. There were also apparently sections of the game that involved driving a car that were cut out, and in the test footage there was a dog in the player's inventory for some reason, but that's most likely not intentional. In the beta footage, it also looks like Marvin had a different storyline, getting eaten by zombies in the office, which closer resembled the original. Here you can see some concepts that show how the inventory evolved, starting out looking much more like the classic inventory. The alligator scene also seems to have gone through several iterations, including one where the alligator has a lot more room to attack like a normal boss, as well as one iteration where Leon and Ada both get chased by it together. And last and possibly the saddest thing to be removed from the game is what appears to be co-op, or at least Claire as an AI-controlled partner. And that is it for this list. I tried my best to find everything I could for you guys, but if there's anything that I missed, please let me know in the comments, send me a tweet, or join the Ink Ribbon Discord server. The links to all of those will be down in the description. If you like this video, then be sure to click that like button so that YouTube algorithm knows how much you love Resident Evil. And if you aren't subscribed yet, it would be very appreciated if you were. Thank you to the community for all the support. I'm Kai Morgan, and as always, thanks for watching Ink Ribbon.